My daughter and her husband were already seated when I walked in. They had a folder, they had a plan, they had everything except one thing. The deed to my farm was still in my name, and it had been since 1989. That morning, Walt opened the file and laid it flat on the table where everyone in that room could see it. Have you ever watched someone realize the ground they were standing on was never theirs to begin with? My name is Gianna Flores. 72 years old, Harlan County, Tennessee, 18 acres of farmland that I have been walking since 1987. For 31 years, I worked as an accountant for the local agricultural cooperative. I signed paychecks for 47 people every other Friday, and I never once missed a single one. That morning at Walt's office, I used these same hands to sign something different. I will tell you what it was. I had a green ledger tucked under my arm when I walked in, 35 years of my own handwriting, every mortgage payment, every tax bill, every repair I paid for alone. I brought it because I knew they had forgotten it existed. Stay with me until the end, because this story does not finish the way Renee and Jackson expected it to. I am okay now, not the performed kind of okay, the kind where you wake up, make your coffee, look out at your own field, and feel the ground under the house like it belongs to you, because it does. To understand how I got to that office, you have to go back to 1987. Earl, my husband, found the listing in the county paper. 18 acres, wood frame house, field that had not been worked in a few years. He wanted it the way some men want land, something in his chest he could not quite put words to. The bank said yes on one condition. I had to co-sign because I was the one with the steady paycheck. Earl was between jobs that fall, so the deed went into my name. Simple as that. A Tuesday afternoon decision that nobody thought twice about. Would you have given it another thought back then? Earl passed in the spring of 2019. Heart failure, fast. We had 3 kids. Gary, the oldest, had been up in Ohio for years, called maybe 4 times a year if things were going well. Linda, our middle daughter, was down in Georgia with her own family and her own life moving fast. And then Renee, the youngest, who lived about 20 minutes down the road and started showing up more after her daddy died. And I was glad for it at first. She would sit at my kitchen table and look out at the field through the window, and I thought she was finally seeing something in this land, the way Earl always had. She asked me once how many acres it was, and I told her, and she nodded slow, like she was doing math in her head. I thought she was feeling connected to something. I was wrong about what she was connecting to. Jackson came around about a year after Earl passed. Renee married him fast and quiet, and within a few months, his name was turning up in every conversation. She would drop it casual. Jackson knows somebody who could get a real good price if you ever thought about selling, Mom. I nodded. I had spent 31 years being the person in the room who listened before she said anything, and I did not see a reason to change that. Did you ever have someone in your life who kept circling back to the same subject without explaining why? Renee called on a Thursday, said she thought it would be nice to get everyone together. Just a quiet dinner, nothing formal, just to talk about things. I made pot roast and cornbread because that is what I do when family comes. Set out the good plates. Gary drove in from Ohio. Linda came up from Georgia. For a little while, it felt like a real evening, the kind we had not had since Earl's last birthday. We ate. Gary asked about the old tractor out back, and I told him it had been sitting since October. Linda said the house looked good, which was kind of her. Jackson sat at the end of the table where Earl used to sit. I noticed that. Did not say anything about it. Then Jackson reached into his bag and set a folder on the table like it belonged there. He opened it without asking anyone. He had been in contact with a real estate company out of Nashville. They already had a letter of intent drawn up, $340,000 for the property. He said the only thing left was my signature. Gary nodded. Linda nodded. They had both been talked to before I was. Nobody asked what I thought. Jackson kept going through the details, smooth and practiced, and I sat at my own table, listening to my own future being described to me like it was already settled. Then he said living out here alone at my age was not practical. He said the sale money would be more than enough to get me into somewhere better, somewhere better. Not a question, just a statement, delivered at my own dinner table, about my own land. I looked over at Renee. She was looking at her plate. Did not look up once, the whole evening. Not when Jackson was talking. Not when her siblings nodded. Not when I finally said I wanted to look things over before I signed anything. Jackson smiled and said, of course, no rush. But that smile was the kind that means the person already knows where this is going. Everybody left before 9. I washed the dishes alone, lay in bed a long time without sleeping. Next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold. Outside the window, the field was gray and still. I thought about 2003, when the roof over the back bedroom started leaking and Earl was in the hospital and I pulled $3,000 out of my own savings to get it patched before the next rain. Thought about the year the county raised property taxes and I picked up extra hours at the cooperative and did not mention it to a single person. Nobody asked then either. So why was anyone asking now? I pulled Jackson's folder across the table, opened it to the letter of intent, and read it the way I read every document I ever handled, slowly, line by line. The names listed as property owners were Renee Calloway Briggs and Jackson Briggs. Both already signed. My name was not on it, not anywhere. I set it down and looked out at the field. Field, same house around me. I understood, sitting there, that this had not been a family dinner. It had been a notification. They had written me out and were just waiting for me to make it official. No anger came right away. What came was something more like recognition. 31 years of reading documents. I knew exactly what a missing name meant. I got up and took the green ledger off the shelf above the stove, sat back down and opened it to the first page. Every entry in my own handwriting. Mortgage payment, January 1989, Gianna M. Flores. Property tax, spring 1992, same account. Water heater, February 2004. Fence post on the east pasture, 2008. Furnace, winter of 2013, when we had 5 days below zero and I thought the pipes were going to go. Every payment from the same account. My name, not Earl's, not Renee's. And then I remembered something. After Earl passed, Walt Briggs had called me about the estate. Walt had been Earl's friend before he was ever our attorney, the kind of man who charged what he said he would and nothing extra. Near the end of that call, he asked, almost offhand, whether the deed was still in my name. I said yes. He said, good. I had not thought about it again until that morning. I went upstairs and opened the closet. Top shelf behind an old folded blanket, Earl had kept a tin box with a latch that never closed right. I lifted the lid. Inside, rubber band gone brittle, was the original deed from 1989. I unfolded it on the bed. Gianna M. Flores. Sole owner. No joint title listed. Just my name, because I was the one the bank had approved. I carried it downstairs and set it next to the ledger on the kitchen table. Then I found something else in that tin box. Underneath the deed, folded once, was a letter in Earl's handwriting. Addressed to Renee, never sent. He wrote that he had leaned too hard on Gary when the kids were growing up. That Renee had spent her whole childhood feeling like she never quite measured up, and that he was sorry. He wrote she deserved more than he had given her. It was a tender letter. It was also the letter Jackson had found and read. He had used it to convince Renee that the farm was the portion she was owed, the thing her parents had never handed her properly. I do not excuse what she did, but I understand now where the open wound was, and that Jackson walked straight into it. That evening I called Walt. He listened without interrupting, which was why I trusted him. When I finished, he said it plain. They cannot sell that property. No legal standing. The deed was never transferred out of my name after Earl died because no transfer was ever filed. He said the Nashville company almost certainly did not know that yet. Walt offered to prepare the full file and schedule a meeting, invite all three kids under the pretense of reviewing a power of attorney. Renee would walk in thinking it was the day everything got finished. I said that was fine. I asked him not to say anything to any of them before then. Do you think you could have sat on something like that for a week without letting it show? In the days between that call and the meeting, I kept my routine. Watered the garden before the heat came up each morning. Had coffee with my neighbor Connie on Tuesday. At night, I sat with the ledger open on my lap, not to plan anything, just to sit with 35 years of my own handwriting. I did not need to rehearse what I was going to say. I just needed to remember what I already knew about this land. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. Put the ledger and the deed in a plain canvas bag I used for the feed store. Drove into town with the window cracked and the radio off. My hands were steady on the wheel. We were all seated by 9. Gary to my left, Linda across from him, Renee and Jackson at the far end. Jackson had his folder out. He looked ready. Walt opened his own file first, laid a single sheet flat on the table, the deed. He pointed to the name at the top and read it aloud. Gianna M. Flores, sole owner. Recorded 1989. Never transferred. He said it without any drama, the way he said everything. He told Renee and Jackson that the letter of intent they had signed had no legal standing because neither of them held title. Jackson said Earl's name. Like that meant something. Walt shook his head. Earl was never listed as co-owner on this deed. The room got quiet in a particular way. Then Walt placed a second document beside the first. 30 years of property tax records, all from a single account under my name. He said he had already contacted the Nashville company that morning to inform them the title was not clear for sale. I had not planned to say much. But I said one thing. I told the room I had been taking care of that land since before some of them were old enough to read a mortgage statement, and I did not need anyone arranging what came next for me. I said it once. I did not feel the need to say it again. Jackson started in about intent, about family, about what Earl would have wanted. Walt let him finish. Then Walt told him calmly that continuing to pursue this transaction would expose him to a property fraud claim and that he ought to talk to his own attorney before he said anything further. Jackson stood up. Renee sat a moment longer, looking at the table, not at me, and then she followed him out. Gary stayed. He said he had not known the deed was still in my name. He looked like he genuinely did not know, and also like he understood he should have asked. I told him now he knew. What would you have said to your son in that moment? The Nashville company withdrew the letter of intent once their title search confirmed everything. Jackson dropped the whole thing after his own attorney apparently told him the legal exposure was not worth it. The plan did not end in a fight. It just ran out of road. I did not sell the farm. I leased 6 acres on the eastern edge to a young couple wanting to grow organic vegetables. They pay on time. They treat the soil right. I replanted the western garden, the one that had gone to weeds after Earl passed. Tomatoes, squash, pole beans. Connie came over Saturday mornings and helped me pull the ground back into shape. We worked mostly quiet. Some mornings that is enough. 6 months after the meeting, my phone rang. Renee's name on the screen. I stood there a moment. I thought about setting it back down. Then I picked up. She said she was sorry. Just that, simply no explanation attached. I could tell it had cost her something to make that call. I did not tell her it was fine. It was not entirely fine, and we both knew that. I said I heard her. We stayed on the line a little while longer without saying much, and then we said goodbye. So, I want to ask you something. If Renee called you after 6 months of silence, would you have answered that phone? That evening, I sat out on the porch steps and watched the field go dark while the sky stayed pale over the tree line. Behind me on the kitchen table, the green ledger was just sitting there. Not a weapon anymore. just a record of a life. They said I needed somewhere better, but I had been somewhere all along. I just stopped asking whether I was allowed to stay. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want to know what happened when Renee and I talked for the second time, let me know in the comments.